All right, good afternoon. We're going to get started, and as people are trickling in here, don't want to lose the opportunity to talk through this with you a little bit. I'm James Hendrickson. I run product management at a Honeywell division called Honeywell Voice, and this is Josh Powell.
I'm a user experience designer at Honeywell. I head up the industrial voice team out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so we're both based in Pittsburgh. We're pretty excited to be here. This is the first time we've attended the Enterprise Wearables conference. And so we're going to be talking about a couple different things here. There's pictures of us, and we'll move off of that very quickly because it's terrifying, at least mine is. So the agenda for today, we're going to talk about some thinking around the products that we have in our portfolio and how we've implemented them, sort of what our portfolio looks like and the history of wearables that we've been doing within the Honeywell Voice business. We were a part of an acquired company called Vocalect. So if anybody in the logistics space, you may have heard of that team. So we are now part of Honeywell. So we're going to talk through some of our thinking around this, around comm computing or ubiquitous computing, look at what our pedigree is in wearables, and see some of this in action before we talk too much. And then we're going to do, I think, a case study that I've been looking forward to doing for a long time. We're doing a case study about ourselves. So Honeywell's a huge company. We're going to talk through how we are actually able to sell to ourselves and what that looked like. And then Josh is going to go through some of the steps that we've talked about for how to put wearables into the value chain. And these are some things that we came up with as we were looking at where we're going next with wearables and what that space looks like. So this is from the father of ubiquitous computing, that the most profound technologies are those that disappear, that weave themselves into the fabric of everyday life until they're indistinguishable from it. This quote is one that really drives a lot of what we have done within the Honeywell Voice business for years. The goal of a voice implementation, and really any technology implementation, is to drive all of the interaction and interface with that worker to the point of disappearing. And allow that worker to just focus on doing their jobs. Because ultimately, that is the fundamental thing that we're paying them to do, that we as consumers expect them to do really, really well with 100% accuracy, and next day delivery, 1 hour delivery. We don't want the technology to get in their way. We want it to be there to empower them to do their job as effectively as possible. So this has been sort of a fundamental element of our design thinking from the very beginning of the Honeywell Voice business. And personally, one that is really powerful for me. So let me just quick do a legacy of what this looks like, what we've been doing. So since about 1987, we've been making wearable computers and hearables, primarily for logistics, distribution centers, manufacturing, very rugged, and it's all been primarily a voice interface. So speech recognition has to be great, the device has to be rugged, and as Seth talked about in the earlier session, has to be able to integrate into all of the back-end systems in a way that is seamless and moves towards that disappearing. So you have this long legacy of wearables before there was something called a wearable. We just called it voice. So this is sort of the pedigree of where we're coming from, and sort of why we have a right to talk to you guys about this. But before we go any further, let's actually see this in action. This is a really quick video, and what you're going to see is this guy's getting direction on what to do. This can be applied in warehouse pick, in back of truck pick, or warehouse put, or inspection applications. Lots of different places. Really, anywhere there is a repeatable process or a checklist is a good fit for this. And we have done things with integrating into AR and other types of vision pick environments, but really, if we're trying to get that to disappear, the technology to disappear, this is still what we've seen is the best way of going about doing this. So you're going to see him get voice direction. He's going to confirm what he's going to do, and you'll see as he goes through this that he's just focused on his task, and occasionally the cameraman.
318. Pick one pack.
1.
Put one in box 1.
517.
Stack 51, level 205.
Ready.
Stack 27, level 206.
Ready.
Bin section 17.
226.
Pick 4 eaches.
So you got a sense of what that looks like, hopefully. We actually slow that down. He works much faster, but nobody can understand it if you're watching it on a video. So let me talk about a case study. And Josh, jump in here if there's anything you want to add to this. I know you're going to get to talk a little bit towards the end of this. So a little bit about Honeywell. I actually always, when we go into sales calls with the sales team, they always like to put this in, and I always take it out. Because if you haven't figured out who we are when you're inviting us in for a sales call, you probably have figured out who we are. So we're a large, very large Fortune 100 company, performs in these 4 areas. We are in the safety and productivity solutions division. And what I want to talk about is not about how great and how awesome Honeywell is, because we are pretty great and pretty awesome. But one of the things that's pretty awesome about that is that we're always looking at ways to get better. And we look at doing case studies and things like that with our customers, but we've actually had a lot of success deploying the technologies that we have specifically within the voice business into our own supply chain and into our own value chain. And one of the areas that we did this with is our own division. So it's our spare parts pick environment. This is actually a poster that was hanging up when I went and visited them, that they were actually advocating to their other workers how great this was. I've never heard a customer be as happy about something as these workers were about our own products. And just as a brief aside, if you guys have worked at a large company before, the hardest thing in the entire world is to sell something to yourself. No one ever wants to buy it. They want it for free. They want all the services to be free, and they want and it's never right. So the reason why this is a case study that's important and powerful is because they're actually really, really happy. In fact, they've done some things that I've never seen anybody else do. They looked at it and they deployed it in a 2-person pick area. They got 100% accuracy. It was so accurate that they removed all their audit process. And they had instant onboarding. So the supervisor who had never done the job before said, well, you know what, we're putting something new and I'll try it. He immediately beat the fastest times that anybody had ever done before. He had never had any training. 400% delivery improvement. So these guys are picking spare parts. You're going to see a video in a second. Picking spare parts that are used to repair other Honeywell products. Not ours, because ours don't break, but other Honeywell products. And more than a 50% increase in productivity, and 63% reduction in labor. So some things that I didn't put on there, we're saving close to $500,000 a year in this one area. These guys were so excited about it, they immediately put together a plan to roll out multiple phases of this across their supply chain. This is a really relatively small operation. I think there's no more than 30 people in the operation. They have a 5-phase plan to roll this out. They're about halfway through it, and by the end, they expect to save over $1 million a year. And Honeywell is very heavily operational focused, and we make sure that we have Lean Six Sigma principles that we're applying, all those things. So this was a very well-run operation already, and we were able to put this in and get that level of savings. So I'm going to watch a video, and then we're going to sort of talk about the future and some things that are some takeaways from this.
The integration started off with trying to streamline our picking process and working and integrating with the CPS system that we currently use. So we wanted to bring the voice technology in, see if we could help the workers work more efficiently throughout the picking process.
What it's done for us, it's allowed us to have hands off the computer, doing more of a manual process, into now we use the Vocalec system, which has sped up productivity from doing approximately 16 per hour, going to now where we do between 40 and 50 an hour.
I'm able to hear the voice gonna tell me to go what racks, what part did they need.
1503. Pick 1.
1.
Rack 15.
Ready?
101. 6 digits.
Our productivity has increased by at least 50%. Defects are zero. We even stopped measuring defects for this area because we have none to report.
It's really been a greater success than we even anticipated. We've been able to reduce the number of pickers by increasing our pick rate, which has allowed us to reallocate those heads to generating more revenue for the business by servicing more products through the repair center.
In all reality, what surprised me most is I initially did not feel that the picking process was the right area to start with. I didn't think that we would get the high payback that we did. I was very, very surprised and very happy to see how much it increased our productivity.
So, so you saw in the two videos that we showed, that one and the previous one, this one, those workers in that implementation chose to use scanning along with voice. That's an option, as well as lots of other peripherals and accessories, because the focus is really around driving the optimized workflow and making sure that you're taking as much of that complexity out of that process. The consultant team here from Honeywell that is in the back of the room ready to heckle us for when we go sideways is probably having a panic attack because they don't really need to have those scanners in there. Am I right, Mike? But they chose to do it anyway, and still saw that improvement.
And it does add that level of accuracy where you saw her walking around, she already has one hand full, she doesn't have to put that down, check off a piece of paper, pick her bin back up and move to the next. It adds that extra layer.
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to sort of move into this, the way that we think about this from a worker-centric wearables perspective. And so you've sort of seen how we've been able to implement this in the past, sort of the pedigree that we have. And as we move forward thinking about this from the worker-centric perspective, what does that wearable look like in the future? This conference is largely about AR and vision systems, but we are viewing this, I think, a bit bigger than that, that the worker needs to be at the center of what we're doing. Otherwise, there's no real point, because then it's just a bunch of technologists playing with technology. But if you think about it from the worker in the center of that wearable ecosystem, you can start thinking about it now more broadly or more differently than what you would have before. So we're able to think about it from a traditional wearable perspective, and then sort of a near field wearable, a far field wearable, and then an ambient wearable. So these are things like being able to, what is within your reach as a wearable that you're going to use occasionally? What are things like a kiosk that you might come up to an address to be able to get some data that you need occasionally? What are some of the IoT sensors that you can use to help drive you through that all sort of create that wearable ecosystem with that worker in the center? So Josh is going to sort of talk about some principles for thinking about this wearable ecosystem with the worker at the center, and what are some of the things that we're using in our thinking for our next generation products from a design perspective. But I think that these things are sort of universal truths, if you will, for the right way to deploy a wearable or really any type of IT project associated with the enterprise.
Right. And so at the core of this whole thing is all of the workers that we're coming into contact with constantly are mobile. They've always been mobile. Most of the time, all we're doing is tying them down with technology. We're putting one more thing here, and we're weighing them down, and we're getting in our own way. They are unable to perform their tasks in a way that is as efficient as we would like, as high performant as we would like. And so really at the core of this is making sure that we're equipping them with the skills that they need. We're providing them with the information from this technology that they need at the right time so that they can make decisions what's best for the specific workflow, what's right for the specific task. I think we always joke that we're in this picking area and a human knows not to put a 50-pound case of steaks on top of eggs, right? But the robot might not know that unless we really train it. And so there are these like last-minute decisions that humans have to make. We need to equip them with that knowledge. You know, they have some of this knowledge now, but there's other information that's going to be augmenting this with all of these new technologies that we're equipping them with.
Yeah, exactly, and keeping that worker in the center of this. I'm going to harp on this particular topic because I think this is something as technologists and in the logistics space, we sometimes forget. We think about wanting to move towards automation or towards robotics, and honestly, if you can automate something or add robots to it, you absolutely should. Do not wait, go and do it as quickly as possible. But for wherever your people are, you need to think about them as both what you've asked them to do and how they behave so far, but also for where they're going to be in the future and where is their ideal state. And we've talked to a lot of workers as we sort of do our research and we think about what is next. And none of them go, you know what, the most important thing for me is to be locked in my office working on Excel. Not a single one of them has ever told me that. They want to be out on the floor. They want to be working with their workers. They want their workers to be absolutely as productive as possible, and thinking about these workers from a mobile-first perspective, and all of the sort of upstream and downstream implications of that is massively important.
That's right. And so we joke about this picture too. These are the types of things we're constantly asking people to do. We're balancing boxes on top of one another. We're flying back and forth. And these aren't always natural interactions for these folks. It's critical that we're paying attention to how our actual users, not our customers necessarily, but the people that are using these technologies that we're giving them. Sure, we might be able to sell it to the customer on a business case, but if it's not really giving the worker the efficiency, the productivity that they need through these kind of natural interactions as they're reaching, as they're able to glance at a wearable to give them additional information, as they're able to use the AR headset, to use the voice to make to pour into these decisions, but making sure that it's natural in the way that they're interacting with the things. And none of it makes sense if it doesn't interoperate. If my voice headset isn't working with my AR, that's not communicating with my cobot that's following me around, helping me do my job or my automated truck, it all falls apart. It gets in their way. It slows them down. It's tech support. It's supervisor involvement. It's completely gutting the whole purpose of all of these technologies.
Yeah, and the cobot piece is important, I think, because we're going to see more and more of that. I already just told you to go buy robots and automation if you can, but you're going to have workers in your space. You might be so great, and you might be able to optimize so to everything is automated, but then you still have to have somebody who actually services the automation. So it sort of is tortoises all the way down, if you will, right? There's always a level of, you're going to have workers in your environment, and they need to be able to interact with those other systems that are there. Otherwise, it's not as effective as it could be, and it doesn't get to that disappearing tech that we talked about.
Mm-hmm. And getting out of their way. Letting the humans do what the humans do really good, making sure that they're being as productive as they can be, as accurate as they can be, as efficient as they can be. This is the focus of the whole thing, right? We're talking about mobility, that's great. The worker's mobile, there's all types of people running around all the time. But if we're losing the focus on the core business uses of these products, and we're focused on the technology, and we're getting excited about the shiny things that continue to pop up, none of it means anything.
Yeah, and we're sort of hitting the wave, and you're hearing it a lot in the sessions that we've been in, mm-hmm. around needing to make sure you have a solid business case for what you're doing. And that seems like that should be pretty obvious, but from a technologist perspective, it's, especially for something that is earlier days, it's easy to look at that as, we know that there's something there, we'll figure it out when we get there. But keeping that worker productivity and that worker at the center of it is absolutely critical, because if nobody's going to give you any more funding to go and do your internal project if you can't actually show an improvement in productivity or make a measurable change in what that is happening in that environment.
Right, and making sure that, we talk about calm or ubiquitous, but getting the technology out of the way of the user so that they can do the thing, right?
Exactly.
Kind of like core. And all of this is creating all types of new data for us, all types of new information streams that we didn't have access to before. So we have these actionable insights into worker productivity that we didn't have a few years ago or 10 years ago, and we need to start to capitalize on those so that we can measure them appropriately so that they pour into our last one, which is helping these people become industrial professional athletes, which I know, haha, sounds funny, but there's only two people in this country that it's okay to have a coach, right? You can be a CEO or you can be an athlete. Everybody else, it doesn't make sense for. We think that that's wrong. We think that's wrong because with all of this information, we need to be creating frameworks for these people to succeed, right? We need to be able to equip them with a framework of thinking, a framework of acting, so that they feel empowered wherever their job is at, whether it's in a warehouse or out on the road or, fill in the blank. We need to be able to equip them to make those decisions, to make the right moves at the right time.
So these last two are become really important, and in privacy-focused organizations or privacy-focused regions, these become sort of hot-button topics and a little bit scary. But when you start thinking about these workers as professional athletes, industrial professional athletes, and the ability to coach them and add not those actionable insights in order to be able to monitor and track your workers, which is where that data seems to have been used, or at least that's the fear of it, but using it to improve their performance and make them better, that's really key to how to think about this. Because if you can make somebody better with the work that you're doing, not fire them, but improve them, that's the way that we're thinking about that.
And more, we're seeing these people bring their own wearables to work. They're bringing their Fitbit, their smartwatch. It's already on them. They want it. Every distribution center that we go into, we see these things already being accepted. There's nothing weird about it.
Yep, exactly. So that sort of leads to this kind of concluding thing here, which is sort of our take on that disappearing tech, right? So empowering mobile workers by seamlessly integrating technology. So that's all technologies, right? That maybe includes paper, that includes labels, that includes scanning, and includes voice and AR and those types of things. It's really all technologies to enhance their physical, cognitive, and emotional abilities in the industrial world. We know that workers are in this space. If we could automate everything, we all would, right? None of us wants to do most of those jobs, and if we're running a business, we don't want to actually have people doing those jobs. We'd love to be able to automate it, but where there are people in that space, we need to make sure that they are as successful as they possibly can be, and that's what I feel like we do really well, and I'm pretty excited about the interest in wearables at this event that I think really kind of leads back to this mission. So I think that kind of concludes it. If you guys have questions, I think we've left a couple of minutes to do that. Or if you just want to run for lunch, I totally understand that as well. Go ahead, you can clap. You can clap even if we don't have questions.